Imagine an entire civilization, advanced, powerful, and vast, disappearing from history so completely that the only record of its existence is a single philosopher's account written more than 2,000 years ago. What if the greatest mystery in human history isn't a myth, but a memory? The name alone carries weight: Atlantis. For centuries, it has lived in the territory between history and legend, dismissed by academics, obsessed over by dreamers, and quietly, persistently, investigated by researchers who believe the story is too specific, too strange, and too resonant to be pure invention. Tonight, we're not going to tell you that Atlantis was real, but we are going to do something potentially more unsettling. We are going to show you just how reasonable it is to wonder. Because when you trace the story of Atlantis back to its original source, and then trace that source against what modern geology, archaeology, and climate science have revealed about the ancient world, you begin to realize that something extraordinary may have been lost. Not just a city, a chapter of human history. Our only written source for Atlantis comes from two dialogues written by the Greek philosopher Plato around 360 BCE, the Timaeus and the Critias. In these texts, Plato has a character named Critias recount a story passed down through his family. The story, he claims, originated with the Athenian statesman Solon, who heard it from Egyptian priests during a visit to the temple of Sais in the Nile Delta. Those priests, according to Critias, possessed written records stretching back 9,000 years, far beyond anything in the Greek tradition. And what they recorded was this: 9,000 years before Solon's time, beyond the great pillars at the entrance to the Mediterranean, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, there existed an island empire larger than Libya and Asia combined. Its people were descended from the sea god Poseidon. They built circular cities of concentric rings, with canals connecting them to the sea. They possessed vast armies, fleets of ships, and control over territories stretching across much of the known world. Then, in a single day and night of catastrophic violence, earthquakes, floods, fire from the sky, Atlantis sank beneath the ocean and was gone. Now, most historians classify this as philosophical allegory. Plato was known to construct elaborate fictional scenarios to illustrate moral and political arguments. Atlantis, in this interpretation, is a cautionary tale about the corrupting nature of imperial power, a warning dressed in mythological clothing. But here is what makes simple dismissal difficult. The level of specific detail Plato provides is extraordinary for an allegory. He gives architectural measurements, agricultural breakdowns, military figures, urban planning schematics. This is not the language of parable. This is the language of a chronicle. To understand why the Atlantis story has such enduring power, you need to understand the world as it existed at the time Plato's story is set, approximately 9,600 BCE. That date places us at one of the most dramatic periods in human prehistory. The last ice age was ending. Glaciers that had covered vast swaths of the northern hemisphere for tens of thousands of years were melting. Sea levels were rising, not gradually as they are today, but in surges, sometimes catastrophically fast by geological standards. Archaeological evidence suggests that sea levels rose by more than 120 meters over roughly 6,000 years. That is the equivalent of losing an entire floor of coastline across the entire planet. Consider what that means. Every civilization, every settlement, every port, every coastal community that existed during those millennia, most of it is now submerged, permanently, inaccessibly. We know ancient people lived on those coastlines. Stone tools, fire pits, and structural remains have been found on the floor of the North Sea, the Persian Gulf, and the Mediterranean, submerged settlements that once existed on dry land. An entire landmass called Doggerland, which connected Britain to continental Europe between 8 and 6,000 years ago, vanished entirely beneath the rising North Sea. If a sophisticated coastal civilization had existed during this period and the rising seas had consumed it, we would have almost no trace of it. The evidence would be sitting at the bottom of the ocean. Over the centuries, dozens of locations have been proposed as the true site of Atlantis. Some are geographically plausible, others are historically compelling, and a few are both. The most academically credible candidate is the Minoan civilization, centered on the island of Crete and the wider Aegean. The Minoans were among the most sophisticated cultures of the ancient world, gifted architects, artists, and traders, with an influence that stretched across the Mediterranean. They possessed a writing system, the famous Linear A, that has never been deciphered. Around 1600 BCE, the nearby island of Thera, now known as Santorini, underwent one of the most powerful volcanic eruptions in recorded human history. The blast was likely heard across the entire Mediterranean. A massive tsunami followed. The Minoan world never fully recovered. Some researchers believe that memories of this catastrophic collapse, transmitted through oral tradition over the following 12 centuries, eventually found their way into Plato's account. Other candidates are more geographically radical. The Atlantic shelf west of the Strait of Gibraltar does contain areas of submerged continental shelf, places where land once existed above sea level and now lies under shallow water. In the mid-Atlantic, the Azores archipelago sits above an underwater plateau that some geological surveys suggest may have been more significantly elevated in the deep past. More controversially but intriguingly, the eastern coast of North America and the islands of the Caribbean contain submerged geological formations and what appear to be man-made structures at depths consistent with sea level rises of the post-Ice Age period. These remain deeply contested in academic circles. One element of the Atlantis account that researchers find particularly striking is its Egyptian origin. The priests of Sais were not mythological figures. Sais was a real city in the Nile Delta, and its temple to the goddess Neith was indeed a center of ancient learning. When Solon visited Egypt, an event that historical sources outside of Plato also record, the priests he would have encountered were custodians of some of the oldest recorded knowledge in the world. Egypt itself had a complex relationship with its own origins. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Nile Valley was settled by people who had migrated from increasingly arid regions of the Sahara as that landscape dried out following the end of the Ice Age, which coincides precisely with the time frame of Plato's Atlantis narrative. Some researchers have proposed that Egyptian civilization itself preserves cultural memories stretching far back into the pre-dynastic era, memories that may encode real historical events in mythological form. What did the priests of Sais actually know? What records did they possess that no longer exist? The ancient library traditions of Egypt, most famously the Great Library at Alexandria, were catastrophically disrupted over centuries of conquest and instability. Whatever was preserved in those libraries, whatever knowledge the Egyptian priestly tradition had accumulated over millennia, is largely gone. The Atlantis account may be, in the most literal sense, a fragment of a history that was otherwise completely destroyed. Here is what we know with certainty. The ancient world was vastly more complex than our surviving historical record suggests. Civilizations rose, fell, and were forgotten long before the ones we learn about in school. Sea levels drowned entire inhabited coastlines. Fire, earthquake, and conquest erased libraries and oral traditions. The gaps in the archaeological record are not just gaps, they are vast, permanent silences. Within those silences, it is entirely possible, probable even, that sophisticated human communities existed and perished without leaving a single recoverable trace. Does that mean Atlantis was real? Historians are careful, scientists are measured. The honest answer is, we don't know. The geological conditions that would have erased a coastal civilization of Atlantis's supposed size would have been the same conditions that make finding it almost impossible. But here is the deeper question that the Atlantis mystery points toward. If a civilization capable of the kind of engineering and maritime achievement Plato describes could vanish so completely that its solely surviving trace is a single philosopher's dialogue, what else has vanished? What other chapters of human history are sitting at the bottom of the ocean, buried under meters of sediment, waiting for technology we haven't yet invented to find them? Maybe Atlantis was real. Maybe it was a memory of a dozen lost civilizations, compressed into a single story by the filters of time, translation, and human imagination. Maybe it was always and only a philosophical fable. But the world that produced the Atlantis legend, a world of rising seas, collapsing coastlines, and civilizations lost to catastrophe, that world was absolutely real. And it may have been far more populated, far more advanced, and far more mysterious than we have allowed ourselves to believe. The ocean floor holds more human history than all of our libraries combined. We have barely begun to look.